بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الصلاة والسلام عليك يا سيدي يا رسول الله وعلى آلك وأصحابك يا سيدي يا حبيب الله. We are going to look at our lesson number 4 in Husami, and we were discussing the third condition of Qiyas. And in this third condition of Qiyas, the Musannif rahmatullahi ta'ala alayh mentioned four parts. There were four parts, four aspects to this condition that we were discussing. And number one is that it should be a hukm shar'i. The hukm that we're dealing with, the ruling that we're dealing with, should be a ruling pertaining to fiqh and not lugha, not language. The second was that the exact same ruling that is found in the asal, that same ruling without any change, bi'aynihi, that ruling should become apparent in the far'. And the third part to this third condition was that the asal and the far'a need to be the same as each other with regards to the illat. And the fourth aspect is that there should not be a nas there should not be a nas which establishes a hukm in the far'. In other words, the far' should be there shouldn't be a nas that we can find which establishes a hukm, a ruling in the far'. Hence why we're going to use qiyas to try and find that ruling. So they were the four aspects to the third condition. And like we said, that the Musannif rahmatullahi ta'ala alayh will discuss each one. He gives examples for each one of these four parts. So because the first condition was that the hukm should be a shar'i hukm and not a hukm which is to do with language, the Musannif gives an example of where qiyas is done by some people in language, and the Musannif does the rad of that. So he says, فَلَا يَسْتَقِيمُ تَعْلِيلُ. Ta'leel is not mustaqim. Ta'leel meaning taking out an illat, establishing an illat for a ruling. That is not mustaqim. And ta'leel is the first step in the qiyas when you try and ascertain an illat for a hukm in the asl. So فَلَا يَسْتَقِيمُ, it is not correct. Ta'leel is not correct. لإثبات اسم الخمر, in order to establish the ism of al-khamr, in trying to establish the word al-khamr, the name al-khamr, لسائر الأشربة, for all of the alcoholic drinks. So trying to use qiyas and ta'leel to establish the word, the name al-khamr for all of the alcoholic drinks, this ta'leel is not mustaqim. This ta'leel, this qiyas is not correct. Why is it not correct? He says لأنه, because it is, أنه is pointing back towards the ism al-khamr, right? He goes لأنه, because it is ليس بحكم شرعي, it's not a hukm shar'i. This is not a hukm shar'i, this is concerning lugha. And qiyas does not work with language. Qiyas doesn't work in language, because language depends upon custom, it depends upon tradition, it depends upon the mood of society, and the way words develop are sometimes illogical and they don't follow logical conclusions and steps. So that's why qiyas doesn't work in language. So if somebody is trying to establish a hukm in language using qiyas, the Musannif says that qiyas would be غير mustaqim, that would be incorrect. So if we were to illustrate this, we would say wine is called khamr, and in the Arabic language wine is referred to as al-khamr, and the Quran refers to wine as well as al-khamr. So if somebody did try and do qiyas, what they would first try and do is ascertain the illat, the reason as to why wine is called khamr. Now wine is called khamr, and what's the illat for that? What's the reason for that? If somebody tried to do ta'leel, he would search and he would say ta'leel is, or the illat is, that the khamr, the word khamr, linguistically, literally, it refers to something which covers the intellect. Ma yukhamiru al-aqla, something which covers the intellect, is called khamr in the language. So that's the reason as to why wine is called khamr. So then he'll end up putting this ruling at the end that wine is called khamr because it covers the intellect. So we have a hukam now over here that wine is called khamr. And why is wine called khamr? The illat is that it covers the intellect. Ma yukhamiru al-aqla. This is something which covers the intellect. So somebody, this is ta'leel now, taking out an illat, trying in order to establish the ism of khamr for wine. Now, if somebody was to now use this as our asl, use wine as an asl, and then look at other intoxicating drinks that are not made from grapes, and said that they also have this same illat, that they cover the intellect. Ma yukhamiru al-aqla. They are also ma yukhamiru al-aqla. They cover the intellect. Then the then by doing qiyas of other intoxicating drinks, not made from alcohol, not made from grapes, but barley or fruits or anything like that, doing qiyas of them upon wine, by saying that the illat is the same in both, that they both cover the intellect, would necessitate that the hukum that is found in wine, in the asl, a similar hukum to that should become apparent in the far'. So therefore, other intoxicating drinks should also be called khamr. They should be given the name khamr. Now, this process that has been done over here, this process of doing qiyas of other intoxicating drinks upon wine, this is qiyas in language, in lughat. And the Musannif said that this ta'leel, this qiyas, la yastaqimu. This is ghair mustaqim, this is not permitted, this is incorrect, because you're trying to establish, because this ta'leel is for the purpose of establishing the ism of khamr لسائر الأشربة, for other drinks, for other drinks that are not made from grapes, alcoholic drinks. And that is not mustaqim. Why? لأنه ليس بحكم شرعي. This is not a hukm shar'i. This is not concerning fiqh. This is just concerning language, and qiyas does not work in language. Language does not have to follow logic. Language is not a product of custom and tradition. It's not. Language is a product of custom and tradition. It doesn't follow logic. So that's the first aspect to the third condition, that the hukm that we're dealing with, should be hukm shar'i and not to do with lugha. Then the Musannif moves on to giving an example for the second part of the third condition. And the second part of the third condition was that the hukm that was found in the asl bi'aynihi, that same hukm should become apparent in the far' without any changes whatsoever. So if the hukm changes in the far' compared to the asl, then that would invalidate the qiyas, because the condition of qiyas is the third condition of the qiyas, part 2 of that, is that the hukm should remain the same in both, in the asl and the far'. So إذا فات الشرط فات المشروط. If the condition becomes invalid, or if the condition isn't fulfilled, then the mashrut is also becomes invalid. So over here, the Musannif gives an example of where where people have done qiyas. For example, Imam Shafi'i rahimahullah ta'ala has done qiyas, and the Ahnaf have argued that Imam Shafi'i rahimahullah ta'ala, his qiyas has a problem in that the hukam of that has changed. The hukam that is found in the asl is different to the hukam that is found in the far'. It is not bi'aynihi the same hukam. And what is that example? What is that qiyas? That is qiyas of the zihar of a dhimmi. Zihar is when somebody compares his wife to their mother and says to his wife that you are haram upon me the way my mother is haram upon me, or they would say you are like my mother, you are like my mother's, you are my mother's back, you are like my mother's back. And this is an old way of saying that you are haram upon me, just like my mother is haram upon me. So although people don't talk like this anymore, but the Arabs did talk like this. They did do zihar previously, and hence the Quran talks about this. The Ahadith also talk about zihar. So if a person does zihar, if a Muslim does zihar, the hukum for that is that his wife will become unlawful for him until he gives kafara. So until he gives kafara, his wife is unlawful for him, and that is the zihar, the process of zihar, if a Muslim does zihar. Now Imam Shafi rahmatullahi holds the opinion that a dhimmi person's zihar is also a valid zihar, just like the zihar of a Muslim. And if a dhimmi person does zihar, then the same hukum that applies to the zihar of a Muslim will also apply to the zihar of a dhimmi. And just to clarify, dhimmi is somebody who is protected by an Islamic government, who lives in a Muslim country, and he is protected by the government. He pays taxes, and he's protected by the government. His life is protected, and his wealth is protected, just like a Muslim. But he's free to practice his own religion, and he lives as a non-Muslim. So the zihar, if a dhimmi person does zihar, his zihar, Imam Shafi'i rahimahullah ta'ala says that is the same, is a valid zihar, just like the zihar of a Muslim. So the ruling that applied to the zihar of a Muslim also applies to the zihar of a dhimmi. So that is the opinion of Imam Shafi'i rahimahullah ta'ala. But the Ahnaf, the Hanafi school of thought is that the zihar of a dhimmi is not a valid zihar. So even if he does zihar, the hukum does not apply to him, and it's not a valid zihar. Why is that the case? The reason is that the Ahnaf say that by doing Qiyas of a dhimmi zihar, which would become the far' in our Qiyas, upon a Muslim's zihar, which would become the asl in our Qiyas, is incorrect, because the ruling will not be the same in the asl and the far', which is a condition for Qiyas. The ruling, if you do Qiyas of a dhimmi person's zihar on a Muslim zihar, you will realize that the hukum will change, and the hukum changing is a problem. The hukum should be the same. It's a condition. So it is, and we'll discuss now why does the hukum change. But if you look at the text, the Musannif says wala and no, and this is short for wala yastaqimu, and it is not mustaqim. What is not mustaqim? Qiyas, ta'lil is not mustaqim. La yastaqimu ta'lilu, ta'lil is not mustaqim. لصحة الظهار الذمي, in order to establish the validity, the validity of the zihar of a dhimmi person. Why is that the case? Because the ruling changes in the asl and the far'. So why does the ruling change? That's what we're going to explain over here. Because a Muslim person, if he does zihar, the hukam is that his wife will become unlawful for him until he gives kafara. So the unlawfulness is limited until kafara. So it's limited until kafara unlawfulness. Now, if a dhimmi person was to do zihar, and if we considered his zihar as a valid zihar, the way Imam Shafi'i rahimahullah ta'ala says so, then bi'aynihi, the same hukam which is found in the asl, bi'aynihi, that same hukam should also become apparent in the far'. So that would mean that the hukum for the zihar of a dhimmi person will also be that his wife will become unlawful for him, and this unlawfulness should be limited until kafara, until the dhimmi person gives kafara. So his wife will become unlawful for him. He can't approach his wife until he gives kafara, and once he gives kafara, his wife should become lawful for him. Now that sounds pretty much the same. The hukum seems to be the same in the asl and the far'a. So where is the problem? How has the hukum changed? The Ahnaf say that in practice, on paper it looks the same, but in practice the hukum has changed. Because if you look at it practically, a dhimmi person, can he perform kafara? The argument is that a dhimmi person cannot perform kafara because kafara is a form of Islamic worship which involves fasting. And Islamic worship is only valid if the performer is a Muslim, and the dhimmi is not a Muslim. So he's not obliged to fast, and his fast, if he fasts, his fast won't be considered as a valid fast because a condition for fasting is that you should be a Muslim. So he is not capable of performing kafara. So if he's not capable of performing kafara, then that would mean his wife will never become lawful for him, because the unlawfulness is until he performs kafara, and he is not capable of performing kafara. So the end result that we have now is that the unlawfulness of his wife for him is forever, right? It's mu'abbad, this da'imi, as compared to the Muslim who can perform a kafara. His wife will become lawful for him after he performs kafara, which could be a week or two later. But for a dhimmi, that would be forever unlawfulness, and that's how the hukam has changed in the far'a compared to the asl. So that's why the Ahnaf say that because the hukam has changed, this qiyas is no longer valid. It is no longer valid to do qiyas of a dhimmi upon a Muslim. Now if the qiyas is not permitted, that means the zihar of a dhimmi is not valid. So in other words, if a zimmi now does zihar, his zihar is not a valid zihar, so this ruling does not apply to him. His wife does not become unlawful for him. No matter how many times he does zihar, his wife is lawful for him. And that is the reason, that is the difference between the two schools of thought, between Imam Shafi'i rahimahullah ta'ala and Imam Abu Hanifa rahimahullah ta'ala. Now the Musannif then now explains this in his own words. He says لِكَوْنِهِ تَغْيِيرًا, because of it being changed, لِلْحُرْمَةِ, because of there being a taghyir, لِلْحُرْمَةِ, in the hurmat, in the unlawfulness. And this unlawfulness, this is mawsoof, its sifat is al-mutanahiyati, that it's limited, right? Bil kafarati, with kafara. This unlawfulness which applies to the Muslim, this unlawfulness is mutanahiyati bil kafarati, it is limited to kafara, until kafara. Fil asli, in the asl, with regards to the Muslim. So with regards to the Muslim in the asl, the hurmat was limited, it was muqayyad, it was limited to what? To being limited until kafara. So that has changed. There's been taghyir in that, and it has changed to what? He says ila itlaqiha fil far'i anil ghayati, to it becoming mutlaq. Now it over here is referring, the ha damir in itlaqiha is referring towards hurma, that the hurmat becomes mutlaq. Itlaq al hurmati, that the hurmat has become mutlaq, it's no longer muqayyad. Remember, hurmat was mawsoof, and al-mutanahiyati bil kafarati is its sifat, and sifat is always a qaid for the mawsoof. So this hurma, which is in the asl, was muqayyad with this qaid, and in the asl, in the far', that has become, hurmat has become mutlaq. This is no longer a condition for that, because the hurmat in the far', the way we mentioned, was, and in the dhimmi's case, that hurmat was no longer limited until kafara, that hurmat became forever. So the hurmat became mutlaq li'itlaqiha, in other words li'itlaq al-hurmati, and it became mutlaq from what? From anil ghayati, from the ghayat, from the limit, from the upper limit. So there was no longer an upper limit. There's no longer the hurmat was no longer limited until kafara fil far'i, in the far', and that's how it's changed. So the way I've translated it is because the ruling of the limited until kafara prohibition in the asl has changed in the far' to an unlimited prohibition, and because of the change, taghyir in the hukam between the asl and the far', the qiyas is no longer valid, and the zihar of a dhimmi is no longer a valid zihar. That is concerning the first 2 points of the first two parts, sections concerning the third condition of Qiyas.